Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us. I have a very special guest here today. His name is Bryan Oakley. He also goes by the Instagram handle @historichoopla. I asked Bryan to come on today to talk about his collection, and in particular, his collection of vintage autographs, vintage basketball autographs, as a matter of fact, and kind of also discuss what it's like to go after vintage autographs as opposed to just your typical vintage basketball card or anything of that nature. So Bryan, first of all, welcome. Thank you so much for doing this interview.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, and why don't you go ahead and give us a little bit of your background and what got you into collecting autographs and vintage autographs in particular?
Yeah, hard to know where to start, but I mean, it started back when I was a young kid. Probably about 6 or 7 years old. My mom used to take me to the grocery store and she'd buy me packs of cards. And later we figured out that those cards were 86 Fleer. So, to go back in time and be able to buy those packs again would be nice.
Must have been buying them for like $1 back then or something, right?
I wasn't the one buying them, but they were cheap, I'm sure. But so later on, when I was sort of middle school, high school age, we sort of figured out like, oh wow, these cards are actually valuable. Sadly, I never got a Jordan, and the cards were not used in bicycle spokes, but they not in very good condition. So in the 90s, the sort of junk era, I was collecting Shaq cards and all that sort of stuff. But also I'm a Portland guy and we had season tickets to the Trailblazers. So I used to go get autographs at the Trailblazers games. And that sort of evolved. And next thing you know, I was like going to hotels and trying to get autographs in other places as well. And then, I always joke around that I think I discovered girls or something. And I just sort of lost interest in collecting up until a handful of years ago, sort of little pre-pandemic. I got back into it. I got back into collecting. I didn't gravitate towards the autographs right away. I just sort of thought they were unobtainable. I didn't have time to chase guys around hotels again and that sort of thing. So it wasn't the first place I went to. I got back into the 86 Fleer and started amassing an 86 Fleer set. But eventually the autograph thing pulled me back in, and that's sort of my area of focus in my collection and my dealings now.
Yeah. So yeah, was there a particular set or a particular player that really hooked you into going after vintage autographs?
Sure. So as I think the 1969 top set was sort of my first real area of focus. Back when I was, a young kid, I was I was getting things signed at games. I found out that Cassie Russell and Bob Boozer, for some reason that I can't recall, were going to be at a Blazers game. And so I went to the local card shop and I was able to acquire their 69 Topps cards, brought them to the game, got them signed. And then when I got back into the hobby, whatever handful of years ago, I discovered those cards again. And they're just such beautiful cards. I mean, you have that like super white background where, a blue Sharpie just pops off of it. And in this case, some of the old school guys will recognize this. These were actually signed with a Visa V pen, a permanent Visa V marker, which are leaps and bounds better than the blue Sharpie. Somebody needs to bring that pen back. It's no transparency. I mean, it's just bold and reliable. It's such a good marker. But anyways, my sort of 69 Topps pursuit began from there. I decided I would mail to like all the living guys, like send out fan mail and go for the TTM autographs. So I acquired those really quickly. And then the obsession kind of continued. I started acquiring some of the deceased players on eBay, just sort of buying stuff up on the cheap. And then from there, I eventually decided I would go for the whole set. And so I think maybe 6 months ago, I acquired my last 3 cards. So that was a hell of an accomplishment for sure. Something I didn't know I would be able to pull off, but with a lot of elbow grease and a lot of reaching out to people, I was able to do it.
Yeah, congratulations on that. That is quite the accomplishment. I can't imagine that there are very many complete autograph sets of 69 Topps, correct?
So as it stands right now, I know of one other. So as far as sort of well-known sets, I think there's two of us. There are a couple people right behind us, though. It may happen. There may be a third or fourth that hops on. There's one guy in particular that I've been trying to help out with the set, and he is down to 97 of 99. So he's missing two very difficult cards, which he may or may not ever acquire. I know that I was very concerned about one of those cards, about whether I would ever acquire one. And luckily I did. And there's another guy in the registry. My cards are not on the registry yet. They will be. My last few are getting authenticated at PSA. So when that's done, I'll put everything up. But there's one other guy in the registry that's at 97 of 99. So I know of at least two guys that are very close, but not quite there.
What are some of the more difficult cards to get from that 69 top sets?
That's a really good question, actually. So I can tell you my last three. I think that will be sort of insightful. Art Williams was one of them. He just wasn't a well-publicized guy. He was kind of a recluse from what I understand. They're out there, but they're difficult. So Art Williams was one of them. Howie Comives, who was a good player and a good signer, but I think he had some health issues later in life and just didn't sign a whole lot towards the end of his life. And he died in the early 2000s. And then I think the most difficult is Art Harris, who just, I mean, do you know who Art Harris is? A lot of people don't know who he is.
I actually don't. I consider myself a basketball nerd, but I actually am not familiar with him.
So that kind of summarizes it. I've actually got one of the other cards too. I can show it to you.
Oh,
this is another cool one. This is one of my very favorite cards that I own. So Gus Johnson's a Hall of Famer. He's not a real well-known Hall of Famer, but he is a Hall of Famer. And sadly, he passed away in '87. So this is a tricky one as well. He was a good signer while living, but of course, people weren't pursuing signed rookie cards the same way in '87 that they are now. This one, I took a gamble on it. I bought it raw, not knowing if it would authenticate. I paid a small fortune for it, but panned out really well. Obviously, it authenticated, but I also graded the card, and the card graded a 6. So it's I think it's got a pop of 3 maybe, and it's obviously the highest grade in the pop report. So this is this will probably, nobody will ever get this out of my collection.
It's a beauty, yeah, definitely. And I personally,
Wilt is a tricky one. Obviously, they're out there, but people don't let them go. The pop is pretty low on those, so that's a tricky one. Guy Rogers is another one. Jimmy Walker, Bill Bridges. These are a few of the guys that are really tricky.
Yeah, Guy Rogers is also tricky for 61 Fleer, as I've come to find out as I've been diving into trying to collect the 61 Fleer autos myself. I don't know if I'll ever get a Guy Rogers.
Well, 3 of them, right?
No, yes, yes.
Down to one, but I had 3.
You had 3. Okay, so good. But yeah, he's definitely one of the tricky ones for that set. So yeah, and so that led you to doing other things. I know you collected quite a few 61 Fleers as well as some 57 tops, and you've got quite a few other things from oddball sets and all kinds of things from back then, correct?
Sure. Yeah. So, it didn't stop at 69. I mean, I didn't see the path turning into such an obsession. Like when I first got started, it was a small and innocent project, and it's turned into much more than that, but I am targeting the 57 top set and the 61 Fleer set. 57 tops will be really difficult. I think I told you before, like it's difficult for me to have things unfinished, but I'll probably have to live with that particular project being unfinished, because you've got Maurice Stokes in that set, who I think he had most people have seen the movie or know the story that he sort of lost function in his body. He became paralyzed essentially after a bad fall, and it sort of happened, I think, in the middle of a game. And I think the sort of data is that he had about a 3-month window before his medical issues began, between the release of the card and when he basically lost the ability to even sign autographs. So maybe there's one or two out there. I think the pop report is at 0. Somebody showed me a photo of one just recently that looks totally good. Maybe it is good. I think maybe it is, but it's not. It doesn't have an authentication, so I don't know.
What about I know like Sweetwater Clifton. Are there known autographs of his out there?
I would imagine so, but they're scarce. I can say that I sadly don't have one. I PC Sweetwater, so I have quite a few autographs of his in my collection, as well as some other things. I've got the card actually at PSA right now, unsigned, getting crossed over from SGC. So I love Sweetwater. That's very high card on my want list. But I don't personally have it. I have not seen one.
Yeah,
but I think he passed away in '87. So there's got to be at least a few copies out there. So hopefully one will land in my lap at some point. Just to sort of give you an idea, it's an 80 card set. I think I'm at 61 out of 80 right now in that set. So I'm deep into it, but where I'll land, in 10 years from now is anyone's guess,
That's terrific. And for those who don't know, Sweetwater Clifton is card number 1 in that set. Is that correct? And he was
I believe so. I actually don't know the card number, but I think you're right about that.
Yeah, and he was the first African American to sign an NBA contract, though he still wasn't the first one to actually play in a game. That distinction still goes to Earl Lloyd. And you've got one of his autographs, don't you?
Yeah, I've actually got that right here too. I'll briefly correct you that actually Sweetwater Clifton was the first to sign an executed NBA contract. There was another gentleman whose name slips my mind right now who signed a contract earlier, but he never ended up playing an NBA game.
Okay.
So, but you were asking about Earl Lloyd. So I brought 3 cards out to show off, and Earl Lloyd happens to be another one. So obviously Earl was the first to play an NBA game. Mm-hmm. And this is another one. It's not the most centered card in the world, but it is the highest in the pop report. This is a 610. So it got a 10 on the auto and a 6 on the card. So this is obviously a nice copy as well. You mentioned some oddball stuff, so I will tell you. I'll tell you a fun Sweetwater and Earl Lloyd story that happened just recently. Another collector told me. He said, "I know a guy that has an old program signed, and it's signed by a bunch of guys, but it's got Earl Lloyd. These are the first 3 African Americans to play in the National Basketball Association. It's got Earl Lloyd, Sweetwater Clifton, and Chuck Cooper all on one program."
Wow.
I said no way. I said these guys, they never played for the same teams. So right. And guys weren't collecting autographs the same way back then that they are now, right? They weren't as mindful about what they were getting signed, how they were getting it signed, who was all on one item. So I was like, no way. I mean, how would you even acquire that? I mean, a couple of the, 2 of those guys died in the sort of mid 80s. And the other one, Earl Lloyd signed for quite a while. But the only way you'd really get those guys would be at games, but they never played on the same team. So how would they all be in the same gym at the same time?
Right.
They did a lot of double headers back then. And I've actually got somebody running the analytics on this for me. So I'll have some data on this in the next day or 2. But they were, because I'm curious how many times those guys were all in the same gym at the same time. But long story short, he said, this guy's got a program. All 3 guys are on it. I said, wow, I've got to get that. If the price is right, I got to buy that thing. That's incredible. There's got to be hardly any of those out there. And I'd been searching for a Chuck Cooper autograph. And It was amazing. The night before I was supposed to meet with this guy, I stumbled on another one that had all 3 players' autographs on it. It was a program. And I found it on eBay. It wasn't very searchable. It was really difficult to find, but just some deep searching, and I found it. So I thought to myself, there can't be too many of these. Like the guy that I'm going to meet with tomorrow, I know it's not the seller because I know where this guy's at and where the seller's at, and they're in different states. I said, this guy must have found this. He knows it's not very searchable on eBay, and he's going to sell it to me, but he's not ever even going to touch the thing. He's just going to like drop ship it from this other seller. He's just going to mark it up, make a profit. So the guy was accepting offers on the first one I was talking about. so I snagged it. I said, there's no way I'm going to let that guy do that to me. I'm going to buy this thing. So I bought it. And then I met with the guy that the next morning, and sure enough, he had a totally different copy. So I ended up with 2 programs in 2 days that were signed by Chuck Cooper, Earl Lloyd, Sweetwater Clifton, all on the same program. I'd be shocked if there's more than 5 or 10 of those in total existence, so.
Yeah, I can't imagine. Yeah.
You were talking earlier about oddball stuff. That's an oddball item that fits right into my to the type of stuff that I like to collect.
That's pretty incredible. That is great.
Yeah, follow me. I'm going to show this stuff off eventually. Historic Hoopla.
Yeah. So how much of your collection has been through the mail, and how much of it has been just going and getting other collections and buying off of eBay and other sites and whatnot?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I'm sort of I'm sentimental about my autograph collection. So, when the guys are living, I really like to acquire it myself, even if I don't get it signed in person, which I don't have time to go, graphing, at hotels and, go out chasing guys that way. But like if it's through a private signing, if it's through the mail, what have you, like I love the chase of that. It's really fun. It's also really time consuming. So I don't do a whole lot of it. But if a guy is living, I really try to get it signed myself. I like the chase and I try and do that. So like, my 69 top set, I think it was something like 60 cards. I think I got myself, like by fan mail or private signings. I'd have to check the numbers exactly, but when you start getting into, 61 Fleer and 57 tops, based on when I sort of started, which is just a couple years ago, like I got to buy a lot of it, just because a lot of these guys are deceased, so still, I think I'm at 61 Fleer. I think I'm at 57 of 66 cards right now. So I'm less than 10 away. Yeah. And I don't know, probably 10 or 12 of the cards I got done myself through fan mail or private signings. And probably an even smaller number for 57 tops. So I go after that stuff when I can, but I really focus a lot on guys today that are deceased just because of the rarity of it. It's a sort of a safer investment, safer place to chase.
Yeah. Well, I mean, people who out there who maybe are looking to potentially get into this, you'd be surprised of how many living players still do through the mail or still do public or private signings, and they're still really good about returning your cards and your things to you. Bob Cousy is still doing it. Jerry West, Oscar Robertson, some of those big guys are still doing it to this day. So you just never know. You just kind of got to do the research and find out who's still doing it. But quite a few people are still pretty good about doing that.
Yeah, there's not too many living guys that if you really want to pursue them, like you can probably find a way to get it done. I mean, even if they don't do fan mail, you just got to get creative and be persistent and just pursue the hell out of it. And you'll probably find a way. Now, there's some guys that have health issues that prevent them from signing. I mean, Willis Reed is one of those guys that I was able to make contact, but they didn't feel comfortable in the quality of his signature based on the status of his health for him to sign. So there are a couple guys out there that are living and you just got to bite the bullet and buy, right? You're not going to get it done yourself. But most guys that are living, you can find a way, Yeah.
So what would be some pointers outside of persistence in terms of through the mail and things of that nature? What would be some other pointers that you might tell someone who is starting to seriously think about getting into vintage autograph collecting?
Mm-hmm. That's a good question. I think number one is don't be afraid to be helpful, right? Mm-hmm. When I got into the 69 top set, there was this guy, Carl, who's got the other complete set. And I had posted somewhere about, being on the chase for these cards. And he responded and told me he had the complete set. And said, wow, I thought he would be really guarded and like not want to share information. And
Mhm.
he like totally coached me along. Like he really helped me understand like who was difficult to get, like he talked to me about ways that he was able to chase stuff down. And I tried to just be sort of like free with information with other people, the way Carl was with me,
Mhm.
and be like open and willing to help. And I found that like really is actually a good investment in my collection, because what ends up happening is you talk to these other guys that have the same interests and pursuits and everything, and all of a sudden they're like feeding you leads, and
Mhm.
maybe there's a card that they want, but they can't afford it, and so they're happy to just like say, Bryan probably would take this, so let's pass this on to Bryan, or what have you. And I think just like broadly, like networking, like, I mean, the 69 set that I put together, like, I mean, I acquired like, how many like stones I looked under to like, that Gus Johnson card I just showed you, that thing was not on eBay. That thing was not at Golden. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
that came from like a lot of networking, like a lot of talking to
Mhm.
different people. I mean, there's one guy I buy from that I still buy from. I am a little protective of this one. He's a great source of cards for me. But I mean, it took me 2 years of just like chatting with this guy for him to ever consider selling anything to me. And actually, he sold me my last 3 cards. And I didn't even know he had 2 of them. Like, I only knew he had one of them. When he told me he had those other 2, when he told me he had Art Harris and Howie Comives, I mean, I almost cried. You know what I mean? I couldn't believe it. Um, so, like I just talk to a lot of people and try to remain helpful and open to discussions about what I'm doing.
Yeah, no, I'm really glad you brought up networking, because that was definitely one of the points that I really wanted to try and hit on. Yeah, I really think that that is still the most valuable thing for anyone that's trying to potentially look into vintage autographs in particular. I mean, yes, we have so many resources at our disposal now as collectors when it comes to all the different auction sites and all the different market data sites and everything you can think of. But yeah, there's just so many things out there that people don't realize are out there. Only the actual collectors who've been collecting these things for years and years and years, they've been holding on to them for years and years and years, know about certain things existing out there that others don't, as well as just knowing a lot more about what is like true market value and things of that nature for some of these real rarity items. And I'll tell everyone real quick. Yeah. So when I started diving into collecting 61 clear autographs, I basically did the same thing you did. I made some posts online, and I had several people respond and would say, well, Bryan is the guy that you should contact if you're really seriously thinking about getting some 61 fleers. And so, yeah, I contacted you, and that started our sort of back and forth. And already I have purchased a couple of my 61 fleer autographs from you, just from spares that you basically had that are pretty rare, that you don't find on eBay or anywhere else, just, at any point in time. So you just never know what can come up when you start talking to people who have been doing this for longer than you have.
Yeah, I would tell you this, like, I'll go back to 69 again, because that's an actual accomplishment, something that I completed. My most difficult cards that I acquired in my 69 top set were not on eBay, were not on Golden. They were private deals, right? And so, yeah, the private deal is really, if you really are getting serious about this, that to me is where it's at.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Other thing I'll say really quick too, I always have a joke, like if you don't have an AOL address, I probably don't want to buy your collection, right? And I just sort of say that jokingly because I like the vintage stuff. I like the older stuff, and like, who's got these old AOL, PayPal email addresses? It's these older collectors, right? And they're the ones that are going to have that stuff. But the fact that they often have AOL or Hotmail addresses, stuff that's not used so prevalently anymore, I mean, it's sort of an indication of where they are in terms of technology sometimes, right? They're not really that interested in being on some of these platforms, right? And so you got to like talk to the guys that maybe talk to those guys. Maybe one of their pals is on Instagram or Facebook, or and they can sort of give you a lead. So yeah, if you're not talking to people and making connections and networking, it's going to be real hard to get deep into any of these projects.
Yeah. So I also kind of wanted to get into sort of the nuances about trying to collect vintage autos, things that are truly rare to find, things that people kind of, if they're not familiar with it, that they kind of need to know, like pop reports, and why pop reports are kind of a weird thing when it comes to determining how many autographs of so-and-so player may actually be out there, and just sort of the differences of figuring out market value for some of these things, as opposed to just going on 130 point or market movers and finding the value of a 61 wilt PSA 7 or PSA 8. Like, you can still figure that out pretty quickly, but it's not as easy when you're going into like things that are autograph signed and truly rare from those time periods.
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple things I would say sort of regarding that. One is pop reports are a great tool for autograph cards. I totally look at them. I give it some credence, but there's a lot of holes in the autograph pop reports, and that's because you've got Beckett, who doesn't maintain a pop report. You've got SGC, who used to authenticate autograph cards. They don't anymore. Obviously, you've got a little bit of JSA card authenticated stuff out there. Obviously, you've got raw stuff, which is sort of a given. But then you've got the old like blue label PSA slabs that are really, they didn't authenticate the cards, so they're not comfortable putting those into the pop report. And then you have the newer red label trading card slabs, of which I'm actually quite a fan. They're not popular. People really despise them, but I think for a rare yet not very valuable card, I'll often do it because I maybe buy it. I don't know if it's authentic. I can spend, $36 to authenticate it dually and wait possibly up to a year to get it back, or I can get it back, in a month or so for like $12. You know what I mean? So to me, I do a lot of the trading card slabs if I know that the card is legit. So all of these, list I just sort of gave you there, it's not going to show up on the pop report yet. There's going to be a fair amount of those cards out there with those types of authentications. So it's a little bit deceptive, the pop reports on the autograph stuff. In terms of the value, I mean, really the best advice that I can give you or give your audience regarding the value of some of these more difficult cards is honestly to trust your gut, trust your instincts. Like, the biggest mistakes that I've made have not been cards that I bought that like went down in value. I mean, there's been some of those, but it's been the stuff I didn't buy, right? The stuff where I got caught up in the numbers and the analytics and, oh God, I don't know if I can do 800 for this card. And I mean, that stuff, I'm kicking myself for that. So, if you learn this stuff, if you sort of learn who's difficult and who's easy to acquire, if you're looking at the date of death, if you're looking at other clues like, Dolph Schayes, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's easy to figure out if Dolph Schayes was a good signer or not. Go to eBay and look up Dolph Schayes signed or Dolph Schayes autograph, right? And you're going to see a million signed 8x10s. The guy signed a ton. Now, because of the era he lived in and because of how people felt about getting valuable cards signed, like say back in the 90s or the early 2000s, the question is, did he sign a lot of his 57 Topps rookie cards? And the answer is probably not that many. Mm-hmm. A fair amount, but not that many, right? So, you got to sort of weigh that out and decide like, okay, the 57 Dolph Schayes is a very rare card. There's no doubt about it, but they're out there. If you're patient, you're going to come across one. But if you have a chance to get a 1957 Topps Ray Felix, again, do you know who Ray Felix is? Probably not. But, if you have a chance to get that card, you better put some money out there. If he falls into your collection, be prepared to spend some money because that's a difficult card to acquire.
Yeah. Well, I remember that was one of the that was one of the things you told me as well. It's just like go for the really rare stuff first if you can. Like go for the Phil Jordans in 57 tops or 61 Fleers if you can, because there are not very many of those around, and you'd be surprised what they go for because of that reason. Like people who know about those cards and know how rare they are will spend a lot of money to obtain those cards, and often a Phil Jordan or a Guy Rogers will go for a lot more than a Jerry West or whatever for that reason. But you better get it if you can, because you can always go out and get a Jerry West at any point.
Exactly. I just sold. I mentioned that I had some of the 61 Guy Rogers. I mean, the top one that I just sold, $7,000 card. You know, and I mean, so is Jerry West. Jerry West is probably not a $7,000 card, right? And Jerry West is, he's the logo, right? He's super, super well-known Hall of Famer, household name type. And then you got Guy Rogers. People don't even know he's in the Hall of Fame, let alone know who he is, right? And one is really rare, one is not rare. I'll take the Guy Rogers over the Jerry West any day.
Yeah. But I also wanted to point out that, even though Jerry West, Oscar Robertson, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, these are guys that have signed a lot over the years. They're really good about signing and returning and things like I said. But you comparing still the amount of total autographs, in particular like autograph like 69 tops Kareems or autograph 61 Fleer Oscar Robertsons, to the amount of autographs of any modern day player past 2003, the numbers are still so much less than what you're dealing with today's current players.
Yeah. And I mean, you have to factor in, what was really the print run for 61 Fleer, for example, right? I mean, it's really not that easy to get a 61 Fleer Oscar Robertson card, right? And then you have to have some, pretty big kahunas to take that card and mail it to Oscar through his website. Risk damage, risk loss, risk possibly he's not a spring chicken anymore, right? Possibly a health scare situation. It's still a pretty rare and unique autograph to get,
I think on PSA's pop report, I think there's like 120. But so even if we say that pop report is inaccurate, there are definitely quite a few more than that, that haven't been crossed over.
For the Oscar, 120.
I think so, somewhere around there. But yeah, and even if you double that or even triple it, because you say, there's a lot more BGS out there and others that haven't been crossed over, you're still maybe talking about, 300 or 400 or so Oscar Robertson 61 autographs that are out there. But how many thousands and thousands and thousands, tens of thousands of on-card autographs are there of, John Morant and Luka Doncic and all of today's popular players?
Yep. Mm-hmm. Well, there's that. I mean, that's a really excellent point. And then there's the other point. I mean, to me, vintage autographs are art, man. It's art, right? Like, I mean, these guys took pride in their signatures, and they can take, I know some people don't like the autographs on the cards, but man, they to me, it's they're adding gold to it. I just love it visually. I love the way that the old signatures look on the old cards. These new guys, man, you want a John Morant autograph? I mean, the it's basically JMT and it's just sloppy and short. I mean, some of these autographs, I don't even know how they authenticate them. Like, I mean, they're so rushed, and there's such a small sort of body of work there. It's, how do you even tell if it's authentic or not? I don't know how you do that,
Yeah, they're just basically their initials now. Like, they're just like LaMelo Ball. It's just like an L and B, M and B or whatever. Yeah, just.
People sort of ask me, like, I'm 42, just to put it in perspective. So like, 69 tops, 61 Fleer. I didn't grow up watching these guys, people want to know, like, why do you chase after this old stuff that, like, wasn't really your era? And To me, again, I think it's visually stunning. I just love the way that it looks. But then, like, why do you want a rookie? Like, why do you want a Michael Jordan rookie card? Like, why is the rookie card what you target? Why is that what you go after? Right? Because it was like, you're getting his card like sort of before he was a star. I mean, Jordan was kind of a star out the gate, right? But he was, a third overall pick. That's like the sort of like draw to a rookie card. You're sort of like getting them before they were that star celebrity. I like the stuff. I like the NBA stuff that's like before the NBA hit its heyday, right? Like, to me, this early NBA stuff, like, I love the NBA. I'm an NBA fan, modern NBA too, but I love the NBA. I like the old stuff because it's like, it's like the NBA's rookie card, right? It's like the pre-Magic and Bird, pre-Jordan stuff. I really enjoy it because it's just like that, like the NBA was in its infancy still,
Yeah.
And I also just think it's like really important that we sort of pay like homage to these guys that were like pioneers of the game, right? Whether they could play in today's NBA or not, that's a totally different debate. I have opinions about it, but I just think it's really cool to sort of acknowledge and recognize the contributions of these pioneers, And so that's why it sort of falls into my collection.
No, yeah, absolutely. I 100% agree with you. Like all those guys that sort of were trailblazers to allow the NBA to become what it's become now, it wouldn't have happened without the likes of a lot of those people. And in fact, I mean, when you look at the 61 Fleer set and you just look at all the names, because it doesn't have very many names, it's only 44 total names, and almost every single person in that set, whether they were a great player or they had some sort of great contribution to the game in some aspect. There were a lot of great coaches that would go on to win championships and whatnot. Like people like Jerry West, who became a great executive in the league, and people like Bill Russell, obviously, who's just a great, just overall pioneer of the game and of the impact that he's had ever since his playing days. Yeah, I mean, there's so much history with every single one of those players in that set, and that's why I personally sort of gravitated toward that particular set.
Yeah, I totally agree, and I think the same could be said. I mean, the really interesting thing about basketball sets, something that I really love about vintage basketball too, that I think really separates it from baseball, is obviously the sets are small, right? So it seems a lot more obtainable to go after a 99 card set or a 66 card or an 80 card set, right, than it is to go after I don't even know what baseball is, 300, 400 card set, Then the infrequency of the sets as well, right? Like you had your 48 Bowman set, which I wouldn't even attempt to do an autograph set of that. They're out there. I mean, there's autographs of those cards out there. I have one. You go 48 to 57, there's a 9-year gap, 57 to 61, 4-year gap, 61 to 69, an 8-year gap, which again, I think 69 is one of the most incredible sets out there. I mean, you go down the list of Hall of Fame rookie cards out of that set, and it's pretty impressive. So yeah, I think those cards are so relevant because there's so few of them, and I dig it.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. I'm out of questions, but I really appreciate you coming on and talking about vintage basketball autograph collecting. So once again, people can find you on Instagram at Historic Hoopla. Is there anything else you want to plug real quick?
No, not at all. I appreciate you having me on. I will say that I really enjoyed your interview with Signed Gowdy. Was it Signed Gowdy?
Yeah. Signed 1933 Gowdy. Yeah.
Yeah, that was really good. I related a lot to some of the stuff that he had to talk about. I've been following him on Instagram, and what a collection. I really appreciated that. I thought it was really good.
Yeah, it really was. And yeah, I mean, your collection's pretty awesome too. And man, I really look forward to trying to find some more vintage autographs with you and seeing how far we can go on this.
Yeah, I got some stuff in the works for you. Just, we'll be talking.